Good day. It's Tuesday, November the 9th. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. Today we've got CEO Chris Overholt of Overactive Media. Overactive Media is a growing integrated global esports media and entertainment company which owns and manages prominent esports franchises and media platforms. I've got Overactive on the call today for a few reasons. Esports is clearly a huge industry that's growing. I get the basics of it, but I want to get a better understanding of all the dynamics in this new industry. Overactive has an impressive management team, board, and prominent investors involved with deep knowledge and experience in sports, entertainment, and media. The company's raised over $80 million to date and has a healthy balance sheet showing that they can raise capital, which is key. And they've also just listed during the summer, so it's a new name that isn't that widely known. But remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. So Chris, thank you very much for joining us today, and let's hear your story.
Martin, thanks very much. We appreciate the opportunity to share and for all of us to continue to learn about this amazing industry that's taken shape over the last several years. That might be a good place to start. Maybe a little bit on my background. I started with the Raptors in 1996, just after their first year, and really that was the birth of what has become a 25-year history in sport and Olympic sport for myself over two countries and globally in many ways. I was with the Raptors for those early years, and then we grew, of course, to become Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And I was there for almost 7 years before I was recruited and go down to the Florida Panthers. I ran the business of the Florida Panthers Hockey Club for a couple of years before I moved over to the Dolphins, where I ran sales and marketing for the Miami Dolphins, and delivered a couple of Super Bowls and some other great accomplishments in that venue with a great team led by Joe Bailey there. I was recruited to come back to lead the business of the Canadian Olympic Committee as its CEO, and did that proudly here for almost 9 years before joining Overactive Media in the fall of 2018. So why is all of that relevant? Well, it's relevant because we really believe that the esports business over some measure of time is going to take shape and start to look and feel like traditional sports. And in fact, the company that we're building and the business thesis that we put forward and the investments that we've made and the assets that we hold have been predicated on the idea that we can build a company that looks like a new age Madison Square Garden, or in this country, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. So on that basis, I'll move you through a presentation, talk to you a little bit about Overactive Media as a company today, where we are and how we take our origin, and then talk to you about how we fit into the global industry and how that makes sense to our position long-term and our prospects going forward. So as I mentioned, we started the company in the fall of 2018 and really set out to build a global leading company from the onset. Of course, to do that, you need to have great people around you and with you every day. And I'm proud to say that we built an amazing team over just the 3 short years we've been operating, and that team is doing wonderful things in an industry already. So Adam, you may know Adam by reputation. He's been around Bay Street for a long time. His background is investment banking and early stage venture. Adam was a founder of Overactive Media, and frankly, I asked Adam to stay in the business because he has a collection of experience that I simply don't have in my lifetime in my business and professional background. So Adam's been serving as our chief strategy officer, and of course, brings all of that experience to bear on the business, but also leads our performance department. He's a bit of a closeted nerd where gaming's concerned, and so runs all of our team performance across our team assets and brands. Allison was with me at the Olympic Committee. She left after 2014, after the Sochi Olympics, to join Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Allison was there for a couple of years before she moved over to Bell Media to serve as their vice president of brand partnerships and client strategy. Allison joined us in the summer of 2019 and leads all of our commercial business as its chief commercial officer. All the marketing, all the sales, PR and comms. Rakesh was with me at the Olympic Committee. Tyler Keenan I've known for years and he spent 10 years in his career building out the Nike brand in Canada around the golf business. Jorge in Spain has started and sold 2 companies in his young life. These are experienced sports marketers, experienced media people and big brand people, and are working every day in our business to grow our space in the industry. So what is that space? What is Overactive Media's ownable position inside the global ecosystem of music or media and entertainment rather? We took our steps early to take a position inside of esports, knowing and seeing the promise of the industry as it was growing and taking shape. And more than that, as I said earlier, really wanted to develop a strategy around a business model that looked and felt like traditional sport. And for that reason, we started to make investments in franchise leagues, the biggest and most important esport leagues in the world. In each one of those, we hold a franchise position. And this would be akin, or I would liken it to the idea that the Madison Square Garden company owns the New York Knicks as a franchise in the NBA, or the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Group own the Toronto Maple Leafs as a brand in the National Hockey League. We own 4 franchises that play in, again, the most important leagues in the world. As an example, we own the Toronto Defiant that play in the Overwatch League, and we own the Toronto Ultra that play in the Call of Duty League. Again, these leagues are the only leagues in the world today that offer businesses like ours, owner group like ours, the opportunity to own franchises and to sit inside a business model that looks and feel like the NBA, the NFL, or the NHL.
Chris,
so we get, yep.
I don't know, maybe this isn't the right time to ask about it, but I'd like to dig into what a franchise, how much do you have to pay to get in? Or do you have yearly residuals or ever how it works? I don't know if now is the good time for that or later on dig a little deeper into how the franchise model works.
Yeah, no, Martin, I think actually a good question for now, and it's more or less where I was going next. So these franchises, again, keep in mind, we use the Toronto Maple Leafs for the purpose of illustration. So you would buy a franchise that holds a position inside these leagues. Think of these leagues as otherwise closed, meaning only teams that own franchise positions can play and compete in these leagues. And these leagues are the highest expression of the game played. So think about it in the context of there are many millions of people around the world that enjoy ice hockey. But the highest expression of that game played competitively is the National Hockey League. Similarly, in Call of Duty, there are 240 million global players of that game at all ages and ranges and stage of cycle as game players. But they're the best 60 players in the world play in the Call of Duty League, and 5 of them play for the Toronto Ultra. So these are the highest expression of these games played competitively. And the business model is for ownership groups like ours to acquire these franchise positions and really enjoy the, again, the same business model that exists in the pro leagues that we've all come to love. So from the bottom up, we build out a local business that has local fan attachment. We sell ticket sales to live events. We sell sponsorships and license merchandise and do marketing deals in the same ways that the Leafs or the Raptors would be out selling sponsorships to brands who are interested in having affinity to those teams. From the top down, again, as franchise holders, we get to sit inside the enterprise growth of these leagues as they do broadcast rights deals, global licensing and merchandise, global partnership deals, and we get to share in all of those revenues. So we get the added benefit of sharing in the global revenues as these leagues build out and take shape and the enterprises grow.
And Chris, these leagues are, and I can't remember who owns Overwatch, but it's like EA or whatever the big global gaming brands, they are the owners of the league itself.
That's right. So the publishers that you're mentioning, in the case of Overwatch and Call of Duty, the publisher is Activision Blizzard. In the case of League of Legends, the publisher is Riot Games. These are the biggest and, again, most important publishers in the world. These are the publishers that have built the most enduring game titles over 20, 30 years. Names like some of those who are watching would understand: StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, Overwatch, League of Legends. These publishers are the producers of these titles, and we have a direct and contractual relationship with those publishers to own a franchise in the leagues that they've stood up around these game titles.
Do they limit how many, because these are global leagues, there's not like the North American League or whatever. Do they limit how many cities or countries can join in these leagues? So there's not like it's diluted where Toronto gets one, Hamilton, Mississauga, and all that?
Yeah, great question. And again, you're right on point. So these leagues do have limited opportunities for franchises to buy into the position. And you're quite right, these leagues are global in their orientation. So Overwatch, for example, has 4 teams in China, 1 in Paris, 1 in London, 1 in Seoul, Korea. League of Legends, there are actually four leagues that are positioned globally around the world. Korea, China, North America, and Europe. And we play in the European League of Legends. Call of Duty, similarly, again, teams in London and Paris. So they're global leagues. As such, and there are limitations to how many franchises can be sold into each league according to our agreement as franchise holders. And as such, these assets are scarce commodities in the same way that there are only so many franchises in the NBA or the NFL. Part of the value that grows over time around these franchise holdings is the notion that there are, again, a scarce number of them available. And so we draw our monies out of our local business market, again, from the bottom up in the ways that I've described: partnerships, ticket sales, again, all the same trappings of a local sports franchise like the Leafs or the Raptors. From the top down, as it relates to, again, our share of revenues on a global scale as these leagues take shape and develop. And on the long-term value of the asset on the balance sheet as a scarce asset. And to give you some indication, Martin, we bought into our positions early in 2018 and early 2019. We've already watched some of these teams change hands. Ownership groups put them up for sale and sell them to willing buyers for upwards of 300% and 400% north of what we paid to acquire our franchise positions. So again, early indication that we're on the right track with our business thinking.
And so once you've acquired this franchise, which is these franchises now that are like 3 years you've had them, do you have to pay an annual residual up to the mothership, or the funds actually go down to you where you do profit sharing or revenue sharing on a global basis?
Yeah, you got it right in the second half there. So we pay upfront to acquire these franchise positions. We can spread those payments over several years, which is, of course, what we choose to do as we put our capital to work. But once paid for, we own the license for the franchise in perpetuity. We own the IP that we develop, and we share in the IP through the business model. And so, as you point out, the revenue then flows down to us into the business as a revenue share, again, in the same way that the Raptors or the Leafs would enjoy revenue share.
And I just want to emphasize, you said in perpetuity. This isn't a 10-year deal. It's as long as the league exists.
That's right. And again, part of the reason we feel such great confidence in these particular leagues is because they're on offer from the biggest publishers who have built out, again, enduring titles that have lasted in some cases 20 plus years. And Activision Blizzard and Riot Games are really the only 2 publishers that have put a stake in the ground on esports as a strategic pillar. So again, we take our investment knowing that these publishers are committed to the long-term health and development of these leagues. You know, we've watched the NBA. I think the NBA is in its 75th year. The NFL, is now a 100-year league. We expect that these leagues are developed and maintain that kind of relevance and evolve over time in much the same ways that we've watched these traditional sports leagues develop, except for a new generation of fans. And so maybe that's a good punctuating point on what we've been discussing the last 10 minutes or so. What we're building here is a 21st century expression of Madison Square Garden or Maple Leaf sports. We've made these early investments in these franchise holdings with an eye to building out content and marketing partnerships and sponsorships around it, and building a delivery of an audience that brands and broadcast rights holders are looking to get to. That coveted 18 to 24 audience that really believes in esports and gaming and thinks of it as their sport of choice. And again, that's a new age audience for a new day, and the company that we're building around is focused on delivering that audience to our brand partners.
One of the concerns I have with, like, yeah, the NFL is 100 years old and and NHL is whatever 100 plus ish and so forth. But with like video games, they're new, they're always getting refreshed and so forth. Do you think there's much of a concern that in 5 years there'll be a new hot game and whatever Overwatch who, and you'll get sort of sidelined, and then you got to buy a new franchise for the next new hot video game?
No, we really don't think of it as a concern in that way for some of the reasons I've already mentioned. Again, the publishers that have stood up these leagues are, again, the biggest publishers in the world. They have a strategic pillar set up in their business around esports as a driving force in their business. And it's not a light lift to develop these leagues and to structure them and build out the competitive balance that goes with, again, selling franchises and developing a league structure. We've watched Activision Blizzard and Riot spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars to set this up. Not every publisher can have the ability to do that or the will for it, frankly. Evidence of the fact that there's really only two, depending on how you think about it, three publishers in the world that have taken this bold step. And so we don't expect that there will be, 15 of these. We think there will be 3 or 4 that are relevant to North America. We think there will be 1 or 2 that are more relevant to Europe. And right now, the only franchise leagues in the world that have been developed and led by these publishers are the ones that we hold. Said another way, Overactive Media's unique position in the global ecosystem today is that we are the only organization that owns 4 franchise positions in the 4 available franchise leagues that exist in the world today. So again, yes, these games will evolve. They'll take shape differently. We can certainly imagine, new fan interface that might include aspects of AR and VR in the future, where the fan gets to actually sit inside the experience of the game. All those things will be wonderful developments for our esport franchises. But again, we take comfort in knowing that we're partnered with the biggest publishers in the world that have identified esports as a strategy for them going forward.
It just sort of, if let's say I want to start an Overwatch league, I could do that, but I wouldn't be sort of the official one. I could invite different teams from different neighborhoods and so forth, but I couldn't really sort of market it. Like I don't have the balance sheet to do that, but like there could be like the XFL versus the NFL, other guys like that.
No. When we bought our franchise position, again, we bought exclusivity and protection and, truthfully, a financial moat around the opportunity to exploit that IP on contract from the publisher. So the only Overwatch league, the only Call of Duty league that will exist are the ones that we play in. And in fact, it's an even stronger protection insofar as if you, just as a fan, would like to stand up an amateur tournament in our market around either one of those game titles by illustration, you need our permission to do that. That's our reserved right at any level, whether it be an amateur tournament or pro level friendly as an example. So again, when we bought our franchise, we not only bought the opportunity to play in the professional league, but we bought all the protections that go with owning the IP in our local market.
So I guess when I click that terms and conditions thing, when I load up the video game, that's part of it, that you guys get those league rights.
Yeah, that's right.
I've never read one of those. So,
well, now you don't need to, you can just call me and I'll fill you in. So let me just, let me keep going on this, because I think it does speak to, again, our position in the broader market. And before we leave this slide, and I promise you we'll touch on a little bit later, but apropos of what we've been discussing about our desire to grow our multi-billion-dollar enterprise into a Madison Square Garden for a new generation of fan, we've taken the bold step to entertain the idea of moving into the entertainment space. And so, as some of those on this call might have noticed, we have been working for now more than a year and a half to develop a strategy to build out our own venue here in the city of Toronto. This will be a 7,200-seat performance venue that is frankly less about our esport investments and more about our desire to grow again into that sports media and entertainment conglomerate. So this will be 180 to 200 nights a year. From the day we open the door, we will compete head to head with Maple Leaf Sports for the premium entertainment music acts that land to the market. Toronto is now the 4th largest market in North America. We're told by our friends at Live Nation, this is the 5th global market for music and entertainment, broadly spoken. And we are working right now on securing the political approvals and the financing we need to build out our version of the Air Canada Centre, built all those many years ago when I worked at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. This will be our home for our generation of fans who think differently about their sports, media, and entertainment choices. So more to come on that. I'll touch on a little bit later. So as I mentioned earlier, we own teams in the most important leagues in the world. And just to give you a sense of the addressable market, 240 million Call of Duty players, 70 million Overwatch players in the world today, and a new version of that game scheduled to come out in the next 12 months. But again, we're excited to be invested in these game titles and with these publishers because they afford us the biggest reach to the biggest audiences available in the esports space today. And so you talked off the top about the business we've been building. Again, at its core, we've taken the step to acquire these franchises in these leagues. Again, we're also deliver live event and digital live event opportunities around content. When we get to the safely on the other side of COVID, which we expect to be next year, we'll be delivering live events in the market of Toronto, ticketed events where our fans can come and watch our teams play live. We're in the brand marketing and partnership business in the same way that the Leafs and the Raptors are out selling strategic positions to brands against their properties. We do the same against Ultra and Defiant and our League of Legends and Counter-Strike positions over in Europe. And again, we're in the middle of developing our strategy for venues and facilities where we can host our teams and other great music and entertainment acts that land to the market. I'm afraid I'll need to correct you, Martin. We've raised now, including the pre-IPO effort, we've raised now over 100 million privately, and really have enjoyed great support from the private capital markets and from our collection of network business relationships. We've driven, while modest revenue numbers, we managed to grow them even during COVID. So as you'll see in a few later slides, 2020 was meant to be our first full operating year. We started the company in 2018. 19 was really our building year. We were building out our operating group and also our franchise acquisition strategy. We had budgeted to do about 12 million inclusive of live events in 2020. Obviously, COVID saw to it that wouldn't be a chance for us. But despite that, we still delivered about 8 million, but 66% of our revenue target in that year. And we provided guidance as part of our Go Public raise that we would eclipse that number further and run closer to 12 million this year on a top line. And in fact, I can confirm that we're right on track to do that. So this business is growing, and the reason it's growing and as quickly as it is rooted in our revenue model. And so the next couple of slides kind of speak to that. Again, a point of difference for Overactive Media next to the rest of the marketplace. So for background, on the left side, you'll see, again, the revenue growth of the industry has been predicted to be and has consistently delivered north of double-digit CAGR for the last 4 or 5 years, and is predicted to continue in that way. In fact, I saw a recent statistic that I can't validate, but just in another presentation last week, I saw a reference to a 2021 number for global revenues approaching 1.8. So I'm not sure yet whether we can confirm those numbers, but again, the growth of the revenue side of the business has been considerable in recent time and as predicted. The nature of those revenue streams, though, is an important distinction in the industry and for Overactive Media. And the reason I say it that way is because you'll see right away that sponsorship and media rights are what are driving the growth of the business. In fact, we expect media rights to grow at some point not so long from now to be co-equal to the sponsorship business. But these two areas of what have been driving the revenue streams in the esports space today. The reason it's an important distinction for us is because the biggest deals that are getting done in the sponsorship space and media rights space are by these franchise leagues that we're invested in and own a revenue share position in. So said another way, when Activision Blizzard goes out and does a big sponsorship deal for Call of Duty or a new broadcast rights deal for Overwatch, we get our share of that. And unless you're an organization like ours that have taken the aggressive position to be invested in these franchise leagues, you don't get your share of the biggest deals that are getting done in the global ecosystem today. So this is, again, another reason why owning franchises makes more sense. If you're not invested in franchise positions, then you are an owner of teams that is reduced to basically playing for prize money each weekend, hoping that you can drag some sponsors along. And of course, nobody wins every weekend. And maybe as importantly, in that model, most of the prize money would go to the players. And so you might win $100,000 over a weekend tournament, but 90,000 of it is going to go to your players, only a 10% gross margin opportunity for the teams. And so we believe the franchise model that we've been talking about the last 10 minutes is really the most, in fact, the only sustainable esport position inside the team business.
Chris, sorry, can you, winding back to that, like what is the different model that's out there? It's for a video game, whatever, Pac-Man, like obviously stupid example, but like if there's a tournament there, it's not an official league, anybody can sort of join in, they don't have the restrictions and the terms and conditions and so forth. And that's where there's sort of ultimate dilution of like how many people can get in, or what is that other model you're talking about?
That's let's use Fortnite as an example, because that's a game that, if you have kids or nieces or nephews, you've probably heard about Fortnite. So Fortnite is a game that is played competitively, and there was a Fortnite World Championship that was hosted in New York in late 2019. There are organizations that own, quote unquote, Fortnite teams. So if you owned a Fortnite team, or if you were an individual player playing in that championship in New York, I think the young guy that was successful winning the single player championship won something north of $3 million. And I think he was represented and backed by an organization. Well, that young guy would have kept 90% of that $3 million. And the balance of it would have gone to his team organization. But again, that is entirely predicated on his ability to win in that moment. And again, there's no franchise fee played. It's an open market effectively, but there's no sustainable revenues. There's no recurring revenues. There's no rev share to hold on to if you're the sponsor of that young fella.
Well, it sounds like whoever is doing that is almost more like his agent. He gets a 10% clip and does the organization, but he doesn't really own it. He doesn't really add that much value to this.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And again, you can't build a business on the premise of winning every time, right? So there would be a lot of weekends where that young guy doesn't rise to that occasion and doesn't win, or doesn't win substantially enough to really deliver any significant money back to the organization. But, back to your question about publishers, like Epic is a big publisher, arguably one of the leading publishers in the world today, but they do not have a strategy for esports. Their strategy for Fortnite has elements of competitive play, as I've just described, but there's no business model for organizations like ours to hold on to. Their business model as the publisher is to draw as many players into the game experience as they can, and then to sell them currency, loot inside the game, and drive billions of dollars for the publisher out of that experience. That's not a model that, an organization like ours can build out around. There's no sustainable revenue you can attach yourself to. There's no sharing of the revenue on the part of the publisher with the team organization. And so we're not invested in any way in Fortnite. It's not a game position or relative. It's not a relevant opportunity as a game title for us as a business.
So it looks like with Epic, and not trying to pick on them or anything, their model is they control everything. They kind of decide who comes in and out, and they don't give anyone sort of except for the best players, a chance to kind of monetize that, where the other publishers have gone sort of the traditional sports franchising. Both have different sort of risk rewards given the model, but this one makes sense for for teams. The other one, I tend to agree with you. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's not a lot of value a team can add to that.
No, that's right. And, in early days of our development, as we were building out our assets, we acquired a couple of organizations. We acquired a company out of New York called Splice another one out of Madrid that, again, now we've leveraged that brand into our Spanish position, the Mad Lions. Both of those organizations were involved in playing in other game titles in Spain, some mobile gaming and FIFA in the case of the company in New York, again, Fortnite and other game titles. At one point, early after we took those acquisitions on, I think we had 14 teams, but within 3 months, we collapsed all of that. We only own franchise positions because it's the only business model that makes sense to growing our business over time.
Makes sense to me. All right, thanks.
So what does all of that produce? And if you're an investor or a potential investor looking in, why would you be looking at Overactive Media and how are we distinguished? Well, our business model, I would like to think, is now distinguished by the assets that we hold. And again, the business model that we believe in and are invested in these franchise leagues. What it produces is really high margin revenue. So when we take our revenue share check, when we take our media rights check from Activision Blizzard or from Riot Games, we don't need to put $1 more into our business to be accepting of our share of the revenue in that way. That's 100 cents on the dollar for us. Similarly, marketing partnership deals that we do in our local market are very, very high margin revenue deals for us. So orders of magnitude, if we take $100,000 in or $1 million in, we put 90 cents of it in our pocket, or 90% of that deal. It's the case that these partnerships typically run about 90% gross margin for us. And so the combination of that with our media rights position really delivers nicely to the top line and bottom line.
Can you just give an example of one of those deals, like in the local market, just so we can kind of visualize it a bit more?
Yeah, sure. And without specifics as to the partner or the structure or nature or size of the deal. But, if we did a deal with Tide Detergent for $1 million a year, we would sell them basically a position to be the exclusive detergent of Toronto Defiant and Toronto Ultra. We would build into that contract of obligation. They would give us the $1 million. And in exchange, we would give them IP leverage and opportunity to use that IP in developing and speaking to their customer base or developing new customer bases. We would give them assets, content, signage at our live events. Again, all the same kind of things that you see traditional sports businesses engage with when they do brand partnerships like I'm talking about. And to do all that typically and on average for that $1 million that we would take in, we would only spend about 100,000 of it to deliver back our contractual obligations in exchange for that value. It's mostly the acquisition of the intellectual property that we own that drives the value of that deal in most cases. So again, that's a high gross margin number for us that really helps us address our top and bottom line needs as a growing business.
I think in regular sports, and I'm not a big sports fan, so I'm a little out of my league here. They have local media rights, like the local TV station plays a local hockey game, and I think the local team gets that. Are there any local media rights, like you can on City TV or whatever in Toronto, like sort of sell the Friday night game to them, or is all that media done through the parent, the league owner?
Yeah, this I would say is more akin to the English Premier League model or the NFL model, insofar as the league does the broadcast deals. And for reasons you would understand, I mean, Twitch and YouTube are the biggest broadcast partners, are the rights holders, and typically the ones that buy these opportunities for these leagues. And they're digital platforms, they're native digital, the business model is different, the audience is on those platforms. Again, more and more, it's the case that the 18 to 24 market is not watching television. They're on Twitch or they're looking at YouTube for their latest video on demand while they're talking to their friends on TikTok or on Snapchat. Again, these platforms are unique and different and new to this generation of fans. And so there's not really much of an opportunity for us to build out a strategy for local media on traditional linear platforms. The audience lives elsewhere. And it's one of the great challenges that the likes of, Rogers and Bell Media in this country are having. It's a big part of the reason that Bell Media is invested so heavily in Overactive Media, as we'll get to in a moment.
All right. Thank you.
And so again, whether it's events or content that typically run about 60% gross margin, in the context of our merchandise business, we tend to take more of a Disney approach and license our business out to others and take our points off the top. But this is a business that delivers a gross margin north of 80% this year. And so that's a very real difference from an ad tech company that lives on either the demand or the supply side of the curve, that is, yes, looking to get to, and in some cases reaching the same cohort that we're focused on, but is doing it largely in a much less effective way and with much smaller gross margins. So what does that mean? Well, again, this 18 to 34 demo is a challenging cohort. Again, they live on platforms that perhaps many on this call have not heard of or experienced. They're difficult to get to in a targeted way. They tend to be cord cutters and ad blockers, and maybe as importantly, they're extremely fickle about the way they see brands land into the spaces that they love. So again, they tend to be blockers of those brands if they're not there. Basically, authentically, they're perceived in many cases to be interlopers. And so if you're on the demand side or the supply side of that curve in an ad tech model, then again, these audiences tend to be shunning you. And the models in both these sides are basically the aggregation of eyeballs in the billions. You apply a CPM to it and you sell it as such. And again, it's just a very difficult platform and mechanism to try and reach these fans. They don't enjoy it. And again, they tend to be inclined to block it. Our strategy is different. We engage with our fans through the things that they love the most. Again, our job is to deliver today's generation of fans. One of the ways that we do that is through our esports business and the investments that we've made in these leagues. And so our fans who are emotionally connected to our brands, our teams, our players, in the same way that maybe some on this call are emotionally connected to the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Montreal Canadiens, you give permission to that team, to that brand, to deliver sponsors to you because the sponsors are supporting the team that you love, the game that you love. And that allows us to not only be more effective in reaching that audience, but also to charge a premium for our brands, our sponsors, to access that audience. That's a much, much different, and we would argue effective model than the ad tech business. And to give you some sense of it, where our gross margins tend to run north of 80%, the gross margins in these businesses tend to run in the 20% range. And so we like our business model and our business structure better.
Chris, in sports, they're notoriously like super fans who just like live, breathe their colors and all that. Are you seeing how engaged, or do you have any statistics or anything to like how attached are people getting to the Toronto Overwatch team and so forth?
Yeah, we don't have enough time for all the research we have in that regard, but I'll give you a couple of things to think about. Our fans, we have super fans like you could only imagine, and maybe super fans that are accelerated by the social media platform and the engagement that goes on around these games. So think about what it would be like to be able to watch your Toronto Maple Leafs play as we watched last night, and to be real time on a platform texting with and speaking to your friends, your fans, your cohort of community that you've built out around that team, or to be engaged in the broadcast directly and actually texting and talking to each other within the broadcast platform. These are some of the differentiators that we see for esports and gaming broadly that do not exist today in traditional sport. Again, these audiences are younger, they're native digital in their orientation, they're global in their orientation, whereas traditional sports are, again, tend to be regional. They're experienced on linear platforms for the most part, although they're starting to migrate because they know the younger audience is there. And maybe as importantly, they're aging out, right? So the generation of fan that is of my cohort, that loved hockey or basketball growing up, are now approaching or maybe already surpassed the age of 50. And in that way, they're simply less interesting to brands and sponsors who know that they need a lifetime of attachment. And more than ever, they need to get to these young fans early in their lifetime development as a consumer to hold them and keep them attached to their brand. So for all of those reasons, esports is emerging as an alternative to traditional sports. And we're seeing more and more brand sponsors come across. And evidence on the bottom, you'll see this is a Nielsen study in 2019. This will be surprising to many on this call, I'm sure. But in 2019, the Overwatch League was the fastest growing league in the world among the 18 to 34 demographic when compared to the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and those you see listed here. The Overwatch League, the newly formed esport league, was the fastest growing when compared to the other leagues that we've all come to grow and love. So again, it's a new day for a new generation of fans, and our job every day is to be out proselytizing for the new opportunity that exists among them.
I guess one metric for, or one measure of how much impact a brand is having is their merchandise, jerseys and baseball hats or whatever else. Is that much of a business yet, or can you give us any sort of indication on lots of people buying the jerseys, walking around Toronto in those?
Yeah, we're starting to see more and more of that. In fact, one of my colleagues was sharing that he got approached by 3 different kids on the same day on the weekend because he was wearing his Toronto Ultra jacket. So, again, we're just getting started in that context. So probably not the same proliferation, safe to say, as the Leafs or Raptors in this market. Now 25 years deep in the case of the Raptors, for example. We're really still in the first inning of our fan development and fan following in those ways. But it scales faster because it's native digital in those ways, right? You can consume this more easily, more comfortably, and on a global basis because of the platforms they live on, like Twitch and YouTube and TikTok and Twitter. And so that's actually a nice segue into my next slide. Again, the benefit and one of the genuine advantages of these leagues and the investments that we've made is that we're again getting to that audience that lives on these platforms. Our games are experienced on the platforms where these kids already exist and are spending most of their time. We've watched our TikTok channel. Again, for those on the call that are aware of TikTok as a platform, you would know it to be relatively new on the scene in the last couple of years. But our TikTok channel has grown by almost 500,000 fans since January around our Toronto Ultra team. So that's a pretty good indication that we're, again, getting to the fans and that they're living in different places. I like to include this slide because while it's now 4 years old, it's as relevant today as it was when we first came across it. Again, this was a Nielsen study conducted in 2017, and it really became the essence of our business thesis. When we first looked at this, of course, what we noticed is that the declared global audience for esports had already eclipsed Major League Baseball and National Hockey League and was coming up already on the NFL and the NBA. So the global audience had grown to be quite meaningful and, again, sizable when even as compared to the traditional sports leagues that have been around for 50, 75, 100 years. But what we equally noticed is that the average revenue per fan that was being extracted out of that audience was still well low. No opportunity yet for broadcast rights deals, for media and sponsorship deals like we've seen the NFL, the NBA, and other major leagues produce over years. And so that seemed like an arbitrage opportunity. You've got this massively growing global audience that is of the right demographic, that scales digital, and it's not yet realizing anywhere near its full potential from a revenue opportunity. And so this is why we made the investment in these franchise leagues, because it looked like an arbitrage opportunity similar to what we had seen take shape and develop in traditional sport. And in fact, we came across at the very same time this case study that talked about the growth and development of the NBA. And it made sense to me because I was in the league in these years, again, having started with the Raptors. But if you go back and look at the very seminal days of David Stern's leadership as commissioner in the late 80s and then throughout the 90s, there were a number of team transactions that took place. These transactions, varied in size and scope, as you can imagine. I think on the low end, the Houston Rockets were sold for about 84, 85 million US, if you can believe it. The Portland Trailblazers and the Celtics in north of 100 million. But again, if you aggregate all of those franchise purchase opportunities, normalize them for inflation, you get the rough equivalent value of what we paid for just one of the 4 franchise holdings that we have. So in a world today where you don't have an NBA franchise that's worth less than $2 billion, but where our audience is scaling at 5 and 6 times the clip to the NBA in those days, we feel pretty great about the fact that we've got our arms around, again, 4 of these franchises with that kind of growth potential as an asset in these closed leagues that we've been describing. And in fact, we're not the only ones that saw this. Robert Kraft, who owns, of course, the New England Patriots, was indeed the first traditional sports owner to make an investment in owning an Overwatch franchise way back in 2018. And soon thereafter, the Cronkies in LA, the Wilpons in New York, the Anschutz and Ted Leonis and Peter Guber, Harris Blitzer and Ziggy Wolf in Minnesota more recently. These are the biggest traditional sports ownership groups that exist in the world today. And each one of them is not only invested in esports, they're invested in one or two of the same franchise leagues that we're invested in, because they understand and believe in the franchise model. They see the growth of the audience, and they see the potential for the monetization of that audience over time in the same way that they've watched their baseball or their football or their hockey assets, or in Europe, their world football assets grow and develop. So we sit at the Board of Governors table with all of these folks. They own their assets alongside ours in these same leagues that we're invested in. And if you believe, as I do, that successful people leave clues, then we think we're in pretty good company here. I mentioned earlier, Martin, our model around sponsorship and the very high margin opportunity it represents. We made an early decision to invest in the people in our business that we knew could build out this strategy and do it better than, frankly, anybody in the world. And we've been successful in realizing that opportunity for ourselves already in just our 3 years. So we hired a guy named Tyler Keenan, I mentioned earlier, formerly of Nike, and before that in the agency business. I've known Tyler for most of my career. He is an established and global leader in the space. And we took it upon ourselves to build out a team around Tyler because we knew how important this piece of our business was going to be, not just in Canada, but in Europe as well. Tyler has subsequently built out a team around him over the last couple of years. And today we have 22 global sponsors, 22 partners that are delivering really significant revenue to this organization on both sides of the water. And as you can see, we've gone out of our way to target really premium, what I'll call non-endemic brands. It's because we knew that if we got those brands to come across and start investing in esports early, that would give the rest of the marketplace and the rest of those non-endemic brands the opportunity to follow with some range of confidence. So the first deal that we did was actually with Bell here in Canada. It was a very sizable, multi-million, multi-year deal. Once we got Bell in the door, we were then able to go to the market with a calling card that basically says, this is an investment that is about now and today. There's an opportunity here for early first movers. And Bell gave us that calling card and enough confidence that we were able to secure Canon, Universal Music, Skip the Dishes. More recently, in the last couple of years, TD Bank has joined us, Red Bull, Jack Links. Again, our team is doing this better than just about anybody in the world right now. And again, we're out there competing every day. It's interesting. We do not compete with other esport organizations or gaming organizations. Where we're winning and losing is because we're going head to head with the Raptors and the Maple Leafs today, because we have a story to tell that they don't. And that is that young demographic that, again, speaks a different language.
And given that you've got a franchise, a sports franchise, you all have sports media backgrounds. So you're talking to like the promotional department of Bell, or you're talking to the same guys who decide, okay, we'll give so many $1 million to the Maple Leafs and so many. So you guys are all speaking the same language and you're from the same base. So it's not like you're having to sort of crack open a new door and say, what the hell are you guys? Like, it's a new market, but you're another sports venue.
Yeah, so a background and then a comment on your last comment. So look, Bell was my 10-year client at the Olympic Committee when I was there, and we enjoyed great support from George Cope and Wade Oosterman, and again, they were colleagues and clients of mine. As soon as I left the Olympic Committee and joined Overactive Media, George Cope called me personally and said, I think we better get together. We've had an open file on esports as an opportunity for a couple of years. And we really think this is an advantage for us. And of course they do, right? They've got a fantastic fiber to the home product in Bell 5. They, at that time, 3 years ago, would have had 5G on the drawing board, and they're now rolling it out. These two technologies, of course, are differentiators for Bell. that they've spent billions of dollars in, and they've done so that they can attract the attention and loyalty of our customer, that 18 to 24 cohort. So not surprising that Bell would see the opportunity ahead of most in the market. And to your point, we're still out having to proselytize a little bit. I mean, the average age of a chief marketing officer in some of these brands is, I'll say north of 40, and maybe not as passionate or as interested in the idea of gaming and esports as an industry, or frankly, as confident in making decisions around it. So we're out doing our bit every day, not just for Overactive Media, but for the growth and development of the storyline around the industry. But we're winning is the point. And the very same people that I talk to at Bell about our Olympic renewal each year, those are the very same people that we're engaged with as we talk to them about activations and the support that they offer our esports teams.
All right.
Bell was in fact so convinced that this was strategic for them. They chose not only to make that multi-year investment in our marketing partnership relationship, but they've invested $12 million in Overactive Media as a strategic investor and shareholder. And so Bell came in again at the very same time in 2019 with an initial $10 million investment. And then they followed that on with an additional $2 million in our round pre-IPO in Q1 of this year. So Bell is a very important partner to us, both in the marketplace, but as a strategic investor in the boardroom as well. As some on this call may know, this is an industry that attracts a significant amount of celebrity, and there are many in the music and sport business who have taken interest in the space. True for us as well, although I would say the subtle difference between Overactive Media and most every other that we come across is that our celebrities have all written checks to be investors and shareholders and part of our owner group at Overactive Media. We have had some that have approached us about wanting to be involved, but they wanted their equity for free. We've never done that. We've never once given any of our equity away. Each one of those that have joined us have written a check to be with us. And The Weeknd was the first to make that jump in the fall of 2018. Mitch Marner and his group joined us last summer. Others that aren't listed here, Sidney Crosby, Phil Kessel, Carl Hagelin, have all written checks and in some cases doubled down with us in the most recent round. The Montreal Canadiens are seven-figure investors in Overactive Media, all because they have a belief in our business model. Humbly offered, they believe in our operating team, and they see the potential of the industry and our model as we do. Willie, Rex, and Vegeta are worthy of mention. I wouldn't expect anybody in this call would know who they are, but these are the two biggest Spanish-speaking YouTube and gaming influencers in the world today. These guys have a combined following of more than 100 million people. And so you talk about, super fans and high energy fans that are attached to this space. These guys are emblematic of it. And as you can imagine, pretty important to our position over in Spain and Europe more broadly. Just the last couple of slides here, again, to demonstrate the progression and maybe as importantly, the impact of those high margin revenues. So again, we started the company October 1st, 2018. 2019 was really a building year for us. We acquired the team assets that we did, built out our operating group, as I mentioned earlier, made a couple of very small acquisitions. But in doing that, gathered up just a little bit of revenue that was attached to those businesses that we bought. 2020 was meant to be that full first operating year, and we were hoping to be able to generate about 12 million that year. Again, despite COVID, we managed not only to deliver a top line of 8.4, but we managed our losses back as well. And that's because we made very difficult decisions and took significant cost out of our business, knowing that, we not only wanted to survive COVID, but wanted to thrive on the other side of it. And then, as I mentioned, we have a goal and set guidance out as part of our raise in Q1 that we would we'd be able to get the revenue stream up to 12 million this year. We are in fact on path to do that. We'll have Q3 earnings to share in the next couple of weeks here. And again, you see the impact of those high gross margin revenues and their impact on the bottom line. As I mentioned, our business is not esports. The business we're building is a 21st century sports, media, and entertainment company. And our bold step into the entertainment space is going to be our 7,200 seat performance venue that we expect to be able to put a shovel in the ground for next year. This venue is unlike any you'll find in the country. It's weird to us, frankly, that others haven't managed to see the opportunity or get it done. We spent a year and a half looking for the land that we could develop and managed to put our sights on the Exhibition Place grounds, and since then have been able to secure the approval of the Exhibition Place board just last week. We will be in front of City Council in December and expect to gain their approval as well, and are already underway imagining how we can, again, get started on this project later next year. It'll be a 30 to 36 month build, so we expect it will be completed and ready to open the doors in 2025. But again, I want to stress, this is not an esports venue. This is not us becoming a bigger esports company. This is us building a venue that will allow us to compete every day, every week for the premium entertainment and music acts that land in the market. This is us being able to compete with Maple Leaf Sports every day and head-to-head for those acts, and to create a new experience for fans that, again, up to now, they've not had the chance to see or live. So a really big step for us, and one that we're excited to be taking, we think, late next year.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions and a comment. And a music van, I'm not a sports fan, but a big music fan, and having a 7,000 person venue is kind of a great size. You get not the super huge acts, but sort of the mid-sized ones in a great venue. Yeah, that's
thank you for that. And I'll just make one comment to that effect. Think about it if you're John Legend, who I think we could all agree is one of the premium, top acts in the world. For years and years, John Legend has been coming to Toronto, and when he does, he plays the arena. And what most people don't understand is, it's an arena with an arena acoustics. But more than that, when they scale that venue for John, it would be typically only producing 12 to 13,000 tickets for sale, meaning, the scale of the stage and the sidelines that correspond to it would limit the audience number. It's not like you're selling 18 or 20,000 seats like you would for basketball. So next time you're John Legend, when you think about coming to Toronto, once our venue is completed, you'll have the chance to play, instead of one night in the arena where you've always played, you'll have the chance to play 2 nights in a far more intimate setting, in a setting that is more tech forward in all ways and gives you a better experience as the performing act. And maybe the opportunity in a future state to create a virtual expression of that concert globally through, technology powered by Bell's 5 or 5G or AR and VR technologies that'll be available to us, we think, around that time. So we expect not only to compete for the 100 nights a year that the arena is conflicted out, because our 2 wonderful sports teams are perennial contenders in these moments at least, and play in and through the playoffs. There's 100 nights there at least that we could be the default venue to. But we expect with this experience to be able to give John Legend an alternative, play 2 great nights in an intimate setting in a very tech forward environment to create a new experience for yourself and for your fans. That's something that will allow us to compete every day.
And the structure, if I remember correctly, I just popped in my head, you're not the typical oval sports ring where you put the stage, you build up a stage at one end and it cuts off a third or a quarter of the seats. You're at like a bowl kind of, or elongated bowl where everyone is sort of designed to look at, like a theater, designed to look at the stage, and the seats are optimized for that.
Yeah, that's right. You see the cutaway image at the bottom. This venue design has just changed. We announced it just on Friday, so we haven't yet updated the deck. But as you can see, the cutaway of the venue there, it has premium destination opportunities, restaurants, and fan experiences like we've all come to imagine in the context of that arena environment here in the city, but a better seating experience, a better live experience for all the reasons you mentioned.
All right. And if we could talk, I don't know if you have another slide on this, but the cost of it, and like real estate deals, and there's a hotel attached to it. Can you give us sort of is that whole venue going to be on your balance sheet? Or are you going to lease sort of priority access to it? Who's going to fund it? Like that could be its own webinar on its own, but can you give sort of a high level simplified view of how that's going to be structured?
Sure. Yeah, great questions all. So as you'll see here, there's contemplated next to it is a 400-room hotel. It's a longer story, but we're in partnership with Hotel X, Henry Callan, and the Library Collection of Hotels. We're developing the land in partnership with Henry and his company. Henry, when he built Hotel X, had secured the opportunity to develop a second tower on this land. And we went to Henry and convinced him that we should build also a venue, and then went to the city and asked for that permission to do so, which again, we've garnered from the Exhibition Place board. To be very clear, Overactive Media is not anticipating that we will be in the hotel business. We don't see that as strategic for our business model. The Kimmels, who are principal investors at Overactive Media and land developers, real estate developers themselves, they will take the responsibility of building out the cap table in the hotel P&L. That'll be their job. So again, the hotel is not part of the plan. On the venue, Overactive Media expects to be 50% shareholders of the venue, partnered with one of the preeminent venue operators in the world and booking agents in the world. Again, we've been working on that relationship for more than a year, and those discussions are active and ongoing right now. As to the overall cost, we're still in the final stages of pinning it, but we think the venue is about $175 million in hard costs, another $25 million in soft, so about a $200 million project. Again, there's a redesign that's not offered here, but we found a lot of efficiency in that. This project was originally reported in the media to be 450, 500 million. It's nowhere near that at this moment. And again, we'll be partners in it. So, you know, a combination of the debt equity finance structure and the partnership that we'll take on, it'll be a very modest need for capital. Our business is $35 million on hand right now, cash raised from our IPO. So we're well positioned to be able to use a good chunk of that cash to finance our position in the venue project.
Gotcha. And like most real estate deals, it'll be a lot of debt and sort of structured or sort of staged debt as the building gets as it gets built out.
Yeah, that's right. There'll be an initial construction financing, then a takeout financing. We've already run the P&L, so we know what it throws off. It's a good, healthy business, and again, partnered with the right operator, can be a success from the moment we open the door.
Gotcha. And so you said you've got 35 million cash on hand right now. Part of that's going to be allocated towards the construction. You've talked a bit about your revenues. What's your burn rate, or are you getting any sort of immediate need or near-term need to go back to market to raise some more funds?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the burn rate's running between $1 million and $1.5 million right now. Again,
that's $1.5 million like a month or a quarter, or?
Yeah, that's right. And most of our our expenses are tied up in the assets that we've acquired in operating these teams, right? We've built out an organization that's still fairly modest for everything we own and everything we're doing. You know, as an example, our venue project has been led by myself and Bob Hunter. Bob was for many years with me, a colleague at Maple Leaf Sports, and then Bob was the one who built the BMO Field, the Raptors practice facility. We hired Bob as soon as we got our opportunity to take this project on, and Bob has been a department of one on the venue right now. So we've been very modest in the way we've scaled this business, and again, it's a fairly modest burn rate, and again, we're just putting our 2022 numbers together, but the cash on hand that we have gives us runway here for the next 2 or 3 years, we think.
All right.
Okay. I started with people. I should finish just quickly with these. Sheldon Pollock is our chairman. Those on this call may know Sheldon is a very experienced investor, early stage entrepreneur, built and sold a company called Onyx, took them public and then took them back private, but again, very successful in all of those ways as our chairman and a founder of the company. The Kimmels are very quietly one of Canada's billionaire families. Made their family money early on in a company called Fabricland, and then pivoted into real estate development. Mike Kimmel and Jeffrey Kimmel and their cousin Ryan are the third generation of that family's wealth. Mike and Jeffrey have been starting to diversify their investments and their holdings into hospitality. They're in a number of restaurants here in Canada and down in Miami. They own a hotel opportunity with Live Nation and David Grutman in Miami. They're 10% shareholders in the Pittsburgh Penguins today. And again, our principal investors and just really, again, great community builders as a family over many years now. And Rizwan representing Bell's interests, of course. Rizwan running the residential and small business operation for Bell. And again, representing the strategic interests of Bell in the boardroom. So Martin, I can wrap there, but what I would hope everybody on the call has come away with is, again, Overactive Media enjoys a very distinct place in the global esports ecosystem discussion today. We're the only organization that owns the franchises that we own in the biggest and most important leagues. We've built a great operating group that is very experienced in the space, consistent with the vision and model that we have to build out a 21st century sports media and entertainment company. And we've got lots of things ahead of us here, even in the next 6 to 9 months, that are pretty exciting. And I would think give the market and investors like those that might be on this call interest to look in.
I've got a couple questions from the audience. We'll hit them quickly. We're over an hour here, so thanks for giving us this time, Chris.
Thank you.
He's particularly interested in Toronto Ultra franchise. How do you plan to expand the reach of this brand following the massive success of last year's season?
Such a great question. And again, for those who don't know on the call, our first year was a rough year. We were learning our space and learning the game and how to be effective in it competitively. We pivoted to a very specific roster set of decisions, and that team, they surprised all of us and really came together and competed and lost in the final last year. That team took a couple of weeks off. Many of them, again, for those on the call who may know, hail from the UK. They're just back and now in training camp here in our practice facility in Liberty Village, and we expect to be able to expand that brand and that fan reach quite considerably this year. We've welcomed all of our players back. They have new, fresh contracts, and we made it clear to them that we brought them back because we really believe they can win a championship. So we're spending we spent virtually no time on the business of running teams in this space. We have coaches and assistant coaches and videographers and analysts that work with our players on strategy and all the things, just like traditional sport. We're currently imagining how we help them, again, get their game to the next level to be world champions, talking to them about their physical and mental health, their wellness and their overall nutrition and sleep habits. We've got professionals working with them in each area. So it's a fun project right now, but we see a lot of opportunity in that Toronto Ultra brand and a great group of guys that are playing really well together.
Could you talk about generally about the player contracts? Are they multi-year deals, or like I'm guessing they're in the multi-millions of dollars a year, or kind of what is the range from low to high end? Could you just briefly sort of sketch that out?
Yeah, so you're right. We have contracted players that play exclusively and only for us. Again, there are many misconceptions go that these players play different games or different game titles. Again, it's no different than traditional sport. If you're an NHL caliber hockey player, you play NHL hockey. That's all you do. If you're a world-class Call of Duty player, you play Call of Duty at the highest competitive level. And so they're dedicated, they're focused, and they work for us as members of the Toronto Ultra team in our example. The range of salary moves around according to the league. So on the low end, the Overwatch players, make orders of magnitude in the low tens of or high tens of thousands, low hundreds of thousands. League of Legends it's a more established game title and a more established player community over now close to 15 years. And so those players are more at a premium and command a little bit more money, but it doesn't run into the millions annually. It runs into the low hundreds of thousands typically. And we as an organization, again, some on the call might understand the reference. We take more of a Moneyball approach to the way we're building this business. Our business is not yet mature enough for us to be, spending that kind of money or exceeding amounts on player contracts. Our job today is to be really great at growing our business in the boardroom and building out a good, healthy revenue stream that we can count on every year in the form of annual recurring revenue. And in the meantime, figure out how to moneyball these contracts and to have great strategies around talent identification and early stage player development. And that's exactly what we did with Toronto Ultra. It's exactly what we did with our Mad Lions brand in Europe. That team was a team of rookies 2 years ago, and they were back-to-back European champions and have played in the World Championships each of the 3 years that we've been in the league. So we're having some success with that strategy and with that management style.
Are there any of the quirks of professional sort of physical sports of like a draft and free agents and all that stuff?
Yeah, there's no draft per se. There's no union of these players, and there's no established kind of developmental pathway through college ranks. So there's no draft to hang on to. There is a free agency period for each one of those leagues, as you describe, and we're right in the middle of it with League of Legends right now, and so we're frantically working to get our players signed and secured for next year. Again, you treat the player opportunity as it is in pro sport. You look to identify talent all over the world, quite literally, because these game titles are played all over the world. When you find that talent, you nurture them, you develop them as your own, and then hopefully get them as a team moving in the direction of a championship. So the strategies are all the same in those ways. What's interesting about this business is we've actually done quite well developing young players and selling players contracts. So again, once you own the contract, you have the opportunity to trade the player or to sell the player in the marketplace. And each of our 3 years of operating, we've taken meaningful money out of player sales. I think on the low end in the high hundreds of thousands, and on the high end closer to 2 million. So each year is a little bit different, but we have a strategy for, again, player and talent development, and for making sure we get the most out of the terminal value of that contract before it expires.
What is that? What, 2-3 years a typical contract, or what?
Yeah, it depends on the game title, but it is typically shorter, and so that serves to have a downward pressure, we believe, over time on these contracts and on the growth of payroll generally attached to players over time. You're on the downside of your ability to play these games by the time you're 24, and you can't play any of them until you're 18. So you have to be a mature young adult at 18 to start playing professionally, and your physiological ability to express yourself physically, through your mind's actions is a very, very challenging thing to sustain much past the age of 24, 25 years old. So there's a finite amount of time for these players. And again, we think over time that'll serve to have a downward pressure on the contracts.
All right. And as the business grows, in a way, I guess, if the contract values increase, it just means the brand and the league has become more and more valuable, in that there's just more money to sort of share and to compete for the top players.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, I wouldn't expect that most on this call were paying attention, but the World Championships for League of Legends just wrapped up. That's a month-long tournament, basically, and just finished on the weekend. The Chinese team, Edward Gaming, that beat the defending championships from Korea, that we lost to, by the way, in the quarterfinals. That game was watched by more than 4 million people globally. That game. The World Championships over the course of the month drew an audience of north of 100 million. And there was at least one photo I saw of all the fans in China backing the Edward Gaming franchise. They were standing in the city square. There were tens of thousands of them watching, as if we were standing out in front of the Scotiabank Arena watching the Raptors play for the final. So this is a real thing. This is again, there's a whole generation that loves these games and loves these game titles and thinks of esport as their sport of choice ahead of basketball, hockey, football, as we've known it.
All right. Well, a couple other questions here quickly. Can you discuss the potential for esports to be added to the regular Olympics, and what could that do for the profile of e-gaming?
I think the bigger question is, what does it do for the profile of the Olympics? We've watched the Olympic movement have to pivot over years to be more relevant, or I was going to say continue to be relevant, but I really mean to be more relevant to a new generation of fans. The Olympic movement has lost, in some ways, its momentum with this generation, and I think it could be fairly said that they've come to start to understand that. In recent years, they've had a specific board sanctioned by the IOC that's been working with the broader gaming and esports community to start to talk about, understand, and maybe develop strategies. My last Olympic Games was Pyeongchang as the CEO of the Canadian Olympic Committee, and esports and gaming is very popular in that country, and There was a StarCraft tournament that was held adjacent to the start of the Pyeongchang Games. In fact, a young Canadian woman won the competition. So, and more recently, just this past few days, there was a headline that spoke to the fact that the Olympic Committee is now apparently engaged in conversations with Riot Games to talk about the potential of League of Legends and the potential involvement of League of Legends as an Olympic platform. Let's put it that way. Whether or not it's included as a medal sport in the proper games, or whether it sits adjacent to, I think is frankly not even relevant. The moment the IOC gives themselves over to the potential of this will be the moment that they realize that this generation of fans does think differently, and that for the Olympic movement, in some ways at least, to stay relevant, they need to be thinking about the inclusion of esports as a sport of choice for this generation.
All right. And just to wrap up here, you mentioned you should have some good news flow over the next coming months and quarters. Can you just, what types of things should we be expecting? I guess more details and finalization on the venue. What other types of things should be on our kind of radar to look out for?
Well, Martin, I know you would appreciate that as a publicly traded company, I don't get to share all those things. But certainly, as you've alluded to, and as I mentioned, we certainly expect to be able to progress our venue story and provide updates to the market as we do so. So we're optimistic and excited about the next 6 to 9 months around the venue story. Our business continues to grow and evolve. This is an amazing industry that's changing and consolidating in some ways and growing in others. And again, with the available cash on hand that we have, we certainly imagine that we could be players in the acquisition space. And we're looking for integrations. We've got platforms in mind for this business that revolve, of course, around teams, but also around our venue and around media and content and products and services that deliver to today's generation of fans. So we're always on the lookout for those types of opportunities, and we certainly imagine that we'll be involved and engaged in discussions that might allow us to grow our business beyond the business as it exists today.
So if you get some big sponsorships, that could be some new news that gets put out there. Is there any opportunity to buy new teams or get other franchises, or are you kind of good with where you are right now? Or if the right opportunity presented itself, you'd take a leap?
Yeah, again, we love our position because we are unique insofar as we're the only organization that owns the franchises that we do. It is our unique calling card to the broader global ecosystem. And for all of those reasons, we're on the inside, as you can imagine, with those established relationships with the publishers. We know what the roadmap for product development is. We know what Riot and Activision Blizzard are thinking about and engaged in as it goes to their strategy around esports. And more than that, and again, I would offer this modestly, but we've carved out an acknowledged leadership position for Overactive Media that's understood globally now. And so we get calls from publishers, under NDA talking to us about, things that they're thinking about in the esports space. And, would we be interested in this concept or that type of franchise opportunity? So we'll continue to think about how we grow our business. But I will say that, we certainly believe in the model that we believe in. Nobody on this call should reasonably expect that we just randomly add 6 new teams to our offering. We're interested in, again, how do we grow our business with the right business model? And for us, that means getting a share of the league revenues, being in a franchise opportunity that allows us to have all at once a view to discounted cash flow and a scarce asset that we can own and develop.
All right, Chris, with that, we are going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for your time. Very informative. A lot going on there. Thank you very much for the time. And maybe we'll get you back in 6 months or a few months, and we'll get a bit of an update on how things have progressed.
That's great, Martin. Again, thanks for your time and your interest today.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.